Good evening, everyone. Just another reminder that we are holding tight for a little bit. We're quite punctual this evening at just 1 after 6:30, but are expecting a few other folks. So if you can hear me, that's a great sign. And once we get started, I'll share some information about WebEx that will help. But right now we're sitting tight. All right, everyone, good evening. It's 5 after, so I want to go ahead and get started. My name is Richard Livingston. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff and Communications Director here at the DC Department of Housing and Community Development, and I'll be providing some brief housekeeping remarks at the start of the program. Of course, thank you all for coming and standing by and welcoming now for our DC fiscal year 2020 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, or CAPER, public hearing. During tonight's public hearing, attendees like yourselves will be in listen-only mode until such a time that those wishing to be recognized are elevated to the role of panelist and can provide testimony. That means that right now we can't see you or hear you, but at that point in the meeting, it is possible that if you'd like to speak, we can make that happen. Individuals who you can see and hear during this presentation are staff at the agency responsible for conducting this hearing. If you have questions during the public hearing, you can submit them online by entering them into the Q&A panel. If you're in full screen view, you can do that by clicking the question mark icon located on the floating toolbar at the lower right-hand side of your screen, which will open that panel. And you simply type your question in the box and hit send. If you're in split screen mode, the Q&A panel's already open and it'll be located at the lower right-hand side of your screen also. And then the same functionality exists for the chat feature. So you can chat panelists who are the individuals you can see in the chat feature. A reminder, this presentation is being recorded. If you experience technical issues, you can contact WebEx, and the technical support phone number and email I'll put in the chat, but it's 1-866-779-3239. You may hear or see me throughout the hearing as I work with the DHCD team to facilitate the WebEx platform smoothly. But otherwise, I'm happy to turn the program over to Housing Compliance Officer Leslie Edmond, who will facilitate tonight's public hearing.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on your Thursday night at 6:30 to participate in a public hearing. I'm sure you have other things to do, but we appreciate you coming here today to spend this hour with us to learn more about what we've done in the last year using federal funds here in the district. So I wanted to go over the agenda with you for tonight. So again, I'm Leslie Edmond. I'm the Housing Compliance Officer here at DHCD. We're going to have Drew Hubbard come on next and introduce himself, introduce the team. We'll do an overview of the CAPER, and then we'll open it up for discussion, the actual plan itself, and you can testify. If you haven't submitted a request to testify, as Richard said before, you need to let us know in the chat or through a Q&A if you would like to speak. And then after that, we'll close the testimony and I'll make my final remarks. Next slide, please. Okay, so I went over the outline of the event and we want to welcome you again to our fiscal year 2020 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, known as the CAPER. So the CAPER is a federal requirement by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development for grantees who receive an allocation of HUD's Community Planning and Development Entitle Funds. In FY20, the district received 5 entitlement grants, as well as CARES Act funds due to the pandemic. So we received 3 additional entitlement awards as a result of the CARES Act. So now that Deputy Director Hubbard is here with us, I'm going to turn it over to him so he can go ahead and introduce himself and the team before we start talking in detail about our block grant funding.
That's it. Sorry for that. Again, I'm Drew Hubbard, Deputy Director of Operations at the Department of Housing and Community Development. Welcome all those who are participating this evening, and just wanted to quickly run through some of the key staff who are helping get through this process. You've started already to hear from Leslie Edmonds, who is Leslie Edmond. I'm sorry, I always try to put an S on her name. Who is the compliance officer for the agency. We have Richard Livingston, who is our communications director and deputy chief of staff. Kellyanne Morrow, who is the grants management officer in the unit responsible for development of the plan. Clyde Edwards, who is a program analyst who works on the plan. Sabrina Givens, also a program analyst, and Janet Powell, also a program analyst, all who contribute to putting this together to make sure that we can maximize our use and the public input for uses of our federal funds. So I do apologize, I was having a bit of technical difficulty, but I believe we are on which slide at this point?
Drew, I'm controlling the PowerPoint. If you want to tell me which slide I need to be on, I apologize.
Well, Miss Edmond, you got through kind of the general entitlement funding, I believe.
Yes, and I was on mute too earlier while I was trying to talk to you guys. Okay, so I went over the general sources on the previous slide. We didn't go over the actual allocations, but as you can see here on this slide, we get 5 entitlement grants. CDBG is funded at about a little over 15 million each year. DHCD is responsible for administering that. We get the Home Investment Partnerships funding as well. That's a little over 5 million. The National Housing Trust Fund, not to be confused with the Housing Production Trust Fund, that's at 3 million a year. And then we have HOPWA funds that DOH or Department of Health receives at 11 million, and the Emergency Solutions Grant that DHS administers, which is a little bit over $1 million. So in our next slide, we talk a little bit more about what we actually do with our CDBG funds. If you want to go ahead and speak on that, Deputy Director Hubbard.
Love to. So CDBG, our Community Development Block Grant, just one of the major federal funding sources, as you see from the slide, covers, has uses in the areas of small business technical assistance, where about 1,530 individuals receive training and technical assistance for their small business opportunities. And these are plans and what we're trying to accomplish in the current, well, in FY20, correct? Sorry. And then the Housing Counseling Services Program, this is what we did accomplish, I'm sorry, bear with me. Assisted 19,884 renters and owners with housing counseling services addressing a variety of housing needs. The facade program is a multi-year construction program administered through local community-based organizations. The CBOs then partner with local businesses to improve their storefronts. In FY20, the facade program was in the pre-development stage and no businesses will begin construction in FY21. The Home Purchase Assistance Program provided 61 families with down payment and closing cost assistance so they could purchase their first home in the district. And then moving on to DHCD's Development Finance Division, closed on a multifamily development at the site of the old Walter Reed, renovating a portion of Abrams Hall for 77 former homeless veterans. And finally, in FY20, DHCD completed Bread for the City, a 30,000 square foot community service building for Anacostia residents. The building will provide access to medical, dental, vision, and behavioral health clinics services. And additionally, the building will have a job center, food and clothing distribution center, legal offices, social service offices, and a fitness center with locker room and showers. So that is the CDBG activities. Next slide should cover home. And then as you see, home activities is a bit over $12 million for home. The program is HUD's first dedicated affordable housing investment entitlement program. The district used home program resources for the Home Purchase Assistance Program, providing 98 families with down payment and closing cost assistance purchase their first home in the district. And then also the Anna Cooper and Karen House affordable housing project for seniors. Both were funded and under construction currently, and will provide 87 units of affordable housing. The next slide, please. The Housing Trust Fund is at $3 million. And this is the National Housing Trust, as Ms. Edmonds pointed out, the distinction from our local Housing Production Trust Fund. This is the National Trust. This is the HUD's second dedicated affordable housing program that provides financial assistance to states and the District of Columbia to finance housing for persons earning 30% or less of the area median income. The district receives an annual allocation of $3 million, as I mentioned, In FY20, DHCD had 3 projects in various stages of development. These projects will provide the district with 220 units of affordable housing for individuals and families earning 30% of the area median income or below. In the next area, next slide, cover HOPWA. As was mentioned, DC Health administers this amount of funding, but of course it is included in our overall plan for purposes of looking at all our federal resources. But just to run through the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS program is the only federal housing program dedicated to the housing needs of people living with HIV/AIDS. District used the HOPWA program resources to fund the following programs. One, a short-term rent, mortgage, and utility assistance program designed to prevent homelessness. The program assisted 133 individuals and families. A tenant-based rental assistance program that provided rental assistance to 43 households. 2 units were established in permanent housing facilities, and 53 units were established in transitional short-term housing facilities. All right, next slide, please. So this slide will cover the ESG, the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, which is administered by the Department of Human Services. And funding as listed is just above 1.9 million. And for this program is designed to provide housing and supportive services to homeless individuals and families. And as I mentioned, it's administered by DHS. The district used the ESG program resources to fund rapid rehousing and assisted 1,086 persons experiencing homelessness. Moving on to the next slide, please. This slide covers the CARES Act funding. In March of 2020, the country, as we all know, was hit with the health emergency caused by the coronavirus. As a result, Congress enacted the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, referred to as the CARES Act. The CARES Act allocated additional funds to HUD to plan, prepare, and respond to the effects of COVID-19. The district received $46 million from the CARES Act, allocated, and $16 million was allocated to CDBG, $1.6 million to the HOPWA program, and $27 million to ESG. The next slide goes into a little bit more with CARES Act programming. As mentioned in those categories, the CARES Act funds are continually being expended in the district. In FY20, the district worked swiftly to create the following programs to plan, prepare, and respond to the negative impact of the coronavirus, known as COVID-19. To begin, a tenant-based rental assistance program, which in shorthand is TBRA, was created using home funds and assisted 133 families with their rent. The program was completed in 2020. Moving on, an additional COVID-19 rental assistance program, CHAP, was created with the CARES Act funds, and to date has assisted 109 families. This program is still in operation moving forward. The COVID-19 Small Business Grant Program was created and assisted 133 businesses in Ward 7 and 8 with operating assistance to prevent businesses from having to shut down. The COVID-19 Nonprofit Capacity Building Program was also initiated and was created to offset the increased cost of the programs because of the coronavirus. This grant assisted 45 nonprofits who work every day to assist the low-income community in the district. The FY20 paper is an important component of this process. And now that the report is drafted and has been available for public review, this hearing is an opportunity to give us feedback on the district's performance for the use of federal funds in FY20. Your comments will be delivered to HUD along with the CAPER. So I believe moving next to open testimony for those who are here to provide such.
So we do have some logistics before we begin the open testimony that I wanted to go over really quick with you. Each speaker will have 3 minutes allotted to them to testify. You'll be provided a reminder to wrap up your testimony around the 1 minute mark. Clyde Edwards, our program analyst, he's going to be the one that's going to be keeping time, reminding you when you have that 1 minute mark. Of course, if there's additional time after everyone testifies, you may make additional remarks. We do give that flexibility as we proceed with the hearing. Registered persons are going to be called to testify first in alphabetical order by their last name. And then all other attendees will be given the opportunity to testify. As Richard mentioned earlier, he's going to call your names. So please make sure you put your name in the chat if you want to testify. So we do have one person who stated they wanted to testify today. We want to see if they are available. Could you let us know, Mr. or Ms. Igenti, Uchenna Igenti, are you here and ready to testify?
It does not appear that anybody by that name is here this evening.
Okay, so let's go ahead and open it up to anyone else that's here that's participating. And then if they come back, we'll give them an opportunity to provide their testimony. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. First up, Mr. William Jordan has indicated his desire to provide testimony. So Mr. Jordan, you have now been elevated to the role of panelist. You may unmute yourself and begin your testimony.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Good evening.
All right, this is William Jordan. I live in Ward 1 in Columbia Heights. So I'm have testimony is really a couple of questions, and hopefully they can be answered as part of this response. The first is the Columbia Heights area still eligible for CDBG funds? And if so, or are they now just restricted to Ward 7 and 8? In terms of the use of those funds, because we still have needs and populations in our area, and I'm not quite sure if we've been abandoned or not. And second, in the presentation, I didn't see anything on the 108 loans that I've seen in the paper over the last year that the agency was talking about doing for, I believe, the Douglas development, but then also read that there was going to be another program using those similar funds. But I didn't see anything in the report about that. So does that mean it didn't happen or will happen? And then, of course, finally, historically, the spending of those funds have happened in this area of Columbia Heights. Is there any reporting or follow-up that discusses the success or failure of the use of those funds? So that's it for me.
Okay, Mr. Jordan, this is Leslie Edmond. So the purpose of the hearing is to provide feedback on the document itself. We don't take questions during the hearing, but I can tell you that the document itself, the CAPER, it lists all of the projects that we did fund and performed activities for in 2020. And so some activities were district-wide and some were limited to specific populations. And of course, all CDBG funds must be used for households at 80% of AMI or below or low income neighborhoods. So it is not limited to one specific ward. So if you would like additional information on how we've used it, you should be able to see that in the CAPER itself. If you're not getting the information, you're looking for a drill down by ward or neighborhood, we can do that as well. And again, as Richard just typed in the chat, 108 is not in the CAPER because we did not use 100 funds in 2020. I'm not sure I understand. Sorry, and Siri's trying to answer my question. Sorry about that. Okay. So 108 funds, again, we have been received approval from HUD, but that is in the future. Thank you.
So a friendly reminder that now is a good time to indicate your desire to provide testimony by typing your name into the chat. At this time, there are no additional individuals expressing interest in submitting testimony. Thank you, Ms. Ambrose. I will call you up next. So hold on a moment while I control the screen. Ms. Ambrose, you're now a panelist and you may unmute yourself and begin your testimony.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, yes, good evening.
Hi, so I'm Ellen and I'm a master's student at Georgetown University, and I'm the policy intern for Jubilee Housing, who I'm speaking on behalf of today. So I just have a test that I'm checking time, but Jubilee Housing serves more than 700 individuals and families with deeply affordable houses facing the greatest barriers to prosperity. That's in thriving neighborhoods with on-site and nearby supportive services. Jubilee's been using federal and DHCD for over 20 years, and in quickly gentrifying neighborhoods of Morgan, Columbia Heights, it's especially important DHCD funds available to ensure stomach diversity. Jubilee believes that income-challenged residents are better able to thrive in neighborhoods with access to a range of resources if their housing is not more. In order to meet Mayor Bowser's goal of housing by 2050, we need to make sure that our pipeline of housing projects moves forward to completion. And we have realized that there are an active pipeline of additional 2,000 to 3,000 units living at different levels of affordability. We're not open last NOFA. The number of projects approved in last year's NOFA were not able to break ground due to lack of sufficient HPTF or home funds. So we believe that DHCD must release a new NOFA with a minimum of $250 million in housing potential trust fund funds designed to address the pipeline backlog and move the project forward. CFO recently produced projected surplus over $700 million for this year. And our city approved a law several years ago that requires 50% of that surplus to be placed in HPF. The new pandemic stimulus legislation will deliver $2.2 billion in funds that should be used for housing protection trust funds. In addition, the new stimulus legislation adds $5 billion to home funds. We commend the district for taking appropriate steps in the fall of 2020 to support affordable housing, even without a NOFA, including the Section 108 application, which will add new capital, and the expansion of DC low-income housing tax credit, which adds equity, thus reducing the pressure on HPTF and funds to support additional projects. Despite these adaptations, without a new substantial housing protection trust fund NOFA this year, Mayor's goal won't be realized. We also recommend HPD continue to support community housing development organizations with both home capital funds and operating funds. CDBG have the capacity to project forward to completion. Available federal funds should also be prioritized to provide additional TOPA technical assistance, because that merger and reinstate a large volume of sales of residential buildings. All right, time. Oh, I just want to conclude and say that we also hope that DHCD will open up a landlord resident portal, because that was really helpful in the quarter of last year for income to be given back to landlords and for renter debt to be cleared. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ambrose. And you did break up a little bit, though we heard, I would say 90% of your testimony. So I would encourage you, if you have prepared testimony, to submit it in writing as well to opm.questions@dc.gov. We'll continue to take requests for testimony in the chat. I understand that Ms. Trina Robinson is joining by phone and wishes to provide testimony. So Ms. Robinson, I will unmute your phone line and you may provide testimony.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
We can, yes. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Does the IZ program fall under the CAPER funding? I just want to know because I wanted to speak on that from a resident standpoint, a previous IZ program resident standpoint.
So the IZ program, the inclusionary zoning program, does not use federal funds. It is a whole program that's regulatory.
Okay, well, never mind. Then I don't want to testify. Thank you.
And Ms. Robinson, if you wish to discuss IZ with the agency, we would encourage you to do so by calling us at 202-442-7200, or you can email the agency at dhcd@dc.gov, and we'd be happy to talk to you about IZ outside of this format. So returning to the chat, there continues to be an opportunity to provide verbal testimony with regards to the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report for last year's fiscal year 2020. And I'm not seeing any additional requests for testifying. So reminding folks, there's always some, don't everybody raise your hand at once, who would like to indicate their willingness to provide testimony on last year's federal funding spending by the agency in our CAPER report. And you may indicate your desire to provide 3-minute verbal testimony by providing your name in the chat. Perhaps the third time's a charm. So I'll remind folks who are listening that this is the last call to provide verbal testimony concerning the agency's draft Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report for our federal spending last year. This is the last request. You may indicate your desire to submit testimony, or rather verbally testify, by typing your name into the chat. Seeing no more requests to testify, Leslie, I'll turn the program back to you.
Okay, thank you everyone who participated, provided their testimony, got more information about our programs. As Richard said earlier, you may still submit testimony by email. You can call us. You can send it in via mail. I think we indicated that earlier. You can send it directed to Director Polly Donaldson at 1800 Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue, Southeast, Washington, D.C. 220. So based upon the testimony that we had today, we're going to gather that information and we're going to submit the final document to HUD at the end of this month on March 31st. I also want to let you know that this CAPER is the last CAPER report in our 5-year consolidated plan that was from 2016 to 2021. We are beginning the process for our next 5-year consolidated plan, which goes from FY 2022 to 2026. So please be on the lookout for more opportunities to engage with us in a proactive manner going forward rather than what we did in the past. So we want to get your feedback. We want to get your input. We're going to have stakeholder opportunities to participate, surveys, focus groups, of course, another hearing as we're required to by law, but we actually want to hear from you about how we should use these resources and meet our goals that we have to do under the consolidated plan. So you'll hear more back from us in the spring about the plan itself, and then our annual action plan that's part of that, as well as our housing trust fund allocation plan and our other plans for any additional funding sources that may come out as a result of stimulus funds as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Deputy Director Hubbard to go ahead and conclude the hearing.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who participated in this hearing. Again, thank you to all the staff who helped make this happen. You see the information before you about how to still provide input, and then as Ms. Edmond mentioned, there'll be more opportunity to look at our future activities and funding coming up as the spring progresses. So we encourage you to look out for that. Other opportunities to interact with the agency, and please do visit our website to look at the different programs that we offer across the board, both federally funded and otherwise. We are here to help residents' needs with housing in districts. So that's DHCD at dc.gov. And thank you for your participation and have a good evening.
Good night. Thank you, everyone, for